Hey guys, welcome to the Raven Knox. Coming up, we have the story of basically a Bonnie and Clyde of murder. Back in the day, it was like this huge story that happened in Britain, and I hope you guys will be just as intrigued as I was. Please note that the content of this recording may contain graphic material, including torture and explicit language may be used. The opinions are of my own and may be offensive to some listeners. They are my opinions. Everyone has them, and if you do not agree, then ignore them like an adult and move on. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Hey guys, welcome to the Raven's Knock. I am your host, Amy.
And I'm Jamie.
Today, we have an interesting story to you. Now, we're going to have to go way back to like the 1960s. But this one I named the Bonnie and Clyde of murder. Yeah. Shall we get started?
Let's get it.
On July 12, 1963, a van was driving down the road along with a motorcycle when it came upon a potential victim. Around 7:30, the motorcycle flashed its lights to signal the van to stop. A 16-year-old girl named Pauline Reade was on her way to a dance. They lured Pauline into the van as the female asked her for assistance in finding a lost, expensive glove. They would take her to the dance after they had looked, and Pauline stated of course she would be glad to help them. They had driven to the moors, which is a vast area of land that is the peak of the Peak District National Park. I looked it up online, and it's a very beautiful place. It kind of reminds you of like the desert, but it's still really pretty. But it's like a national park, so it's one of those places to where, you know, when I looked at it, it looked like many people didn't like show up to go
Where
there.
is it at?
This is overseas. This is in Britain, I think. Once there, when the motorcycle came around them, she stated that the man would be helping them as well and introduced themselves. The man was eyeing Brady, and she was Myra Hindley. Hindley waited in the van while Brady took Pauline away to look for the glove. About 30 minutes later, Brady walked back solo and took Hindley to the spot where Pauline lay dying. Her clothes were disheveled, and she had been almost decapitated.
Oh my God.
She had 2 cuts to her throat and a 4-inch incision across her voice box that took quite a bit of force. When Hindley asked Brady if he raped her, he said, "Well, of course I did." Like that was, yeah, like
that's
that was
just normal.
Yeah, like that was a stupid question.
Like, what else did you expect?
Yeah.
Wow.
Brady would go on to say later that Hindley was there the entire time and participated in the sexual assault. November 23rd, 1963, Brady and Hindley offered a ride to a 12-year-old boy named John Kilbride. They told him they would give him a ride home and he could even have a drink of sherry. Once in the car, they told him they would be stopping by their house so they could get the sherry. Then they asked his help in finding the lost glove. He said sure. So they drove up to Moore's. Again, Hindley waited in the car while Brady and John went to look. Brady sexually assaulted John and tried to slit his throat with a 6-inch serrated knife before he settled on just strangling him. Then he dug a shallow grave and put him in it. They took a picture of Hindley with her dog standing on top of the grave. On June 16, 1964, Hindley began talking to another 12-year-old boy named Kenneth Bennett. He was on his way to his grandmother's house, and he helped her load some packages up in her van, and she offered to take him to his grandmother's place. So Bennett got in the van, not knowing that Brady was in the back. Again, they drove out to Moore, and Brady took Bennett off to look for the glove. After about 30 to 45 minutes, Brady comes back carrying a shovel that he had hidden there. He told her that he assaulted Bennett and ended up strangling him. So that's 2.
Jeez.
On December 26, 1964, Brady and Hindley attended a fair when they noticed a 10-year-old girl all by herself. Her name was Lesley Downey. Now, this one bothered me because she was so young.
Mm-hmm.
And what parent leaves their 10-year-old child alone at a fair?
Exactly, because you know what kind of people not
Yeah.
only work there, but are just
Are there.
everywhere.
Yeah, you got pedophiles and everything there because it's a fair and they know that there's going to be kids there.
Yeah.
But I have to remember this was 1964. This is way before we were ever born. So they dropped some shopping bags on the ground on purpose, and they asked Lesley if she would help them take the bags to the car. And of course she said she would.
Mm-hmm.
Once they got to the car, they talked her into going home with them so she could help them unload the bags. Now, normally you would think they would be flag after flag, but you have to remember she's only 10 years old.
Right.
So, you know, the world is all rainbows and candy to her.
Of course.
Once in the car, they did drive her to their home, but then they stripped her naked, they gagged her, and made her pose for pictures before raping and killing her. And they videoed this attack, and you can hear the voices of Hindley and Brady during the attack, and you could hear Lesley pleading for her life.
Oh, that's awful.
Hindley would later say that during this time, she was running a bath and she didn't see anything. But when she came back in the room, Lesley was dead. And Brady would blame this murder on Hindley. They took her body to Moore, and they buried her in the shallow grave. And they buried her naked, and they put her clothes at her feet. On October 6, 1965, Hindley took Brady to a railroad station to find another victim. Brady really liked railroad stations, and soon he appeared with a 17-year-old boy named Edward Evans, who was working as an apprentice. He introduced Hindley as his sister, and Brady would later say that he picked him up strictly for sex. They took Edward to their home and they drank some wine. And during this time, Brady was trying to win over Hindley's family, and her sister had just married a guy, and his last name is Smith, and he called to have him to come over. It seemed that, like, Smith was the only one who liked him and seemed to be even fascinated by Brady. And
wow.
of course, he came right over.
Right.
He waited outside for a signal that it was okay to come inside. Smith asked if he was called there to get some miniature wine bottles. And while Brady led him into the kitchen to fetch the wine bottles, he heard a loud, high-pitched scream. He thought it sounded like a female, and it was one scream after another. And then he heard his name being called as they were needing help. When he went into the room, he saw a young lad. He was lying there with his head and shoulders on the couch, but his feet were on the floor. He was still screaming in the high-pitched tone, and Smith realized that it was not a female, but it was actually a male. He said Brady was over top of him holding a hatchet, and then he swung the hatchet down and hit Edward in the head with it.
What the hell?
I know, he said it sounded horrible. And then he saw Brady straddle Edward, and he had put an extension cord around his neck. He stated that Brady had sprung his ankle during the altercation, and Edward was heavy. And so they wrapped him up in plastic sheeting and put him in the bedroom for, until the time that they could dispose of him.
Right.
After he had murdered Edward, Smith agreed to come back the next day with his dead daughter's stroller to help transport Edward from the house to the car.
My God.
Yeah. Brady had went out and came back home at 3 a.m. and asked Hindley for a cup of tea. He drank it, but he threw up. At daybreak, Smith armed himself with a screwdriver and a butcher knife in case Brady was coming after him. Smith called the police, and they came and picked Smith up and took him to the police station, and he told them everything that he had witnessed.
I don't blame him. I would have too.
The police went to the home of Hindley and Brady dressed as a delivery man. Now, I'm not sure why they done this. Once Hindley opened the door, the officer asked to speak with her husband. She denied having a husband, so the officer asked to speak to the man of the house, and she denied having one. Then he told her his real identity. So she thought, well, I better let him in. So she took the officer to the living room where Brady was laying down on a daybed, writing to his boss about his sprained ankle. The officer was explaining that he was investigating an act of violence involving a gun. When the officer asked for the key to the spare room, Hindley stated the key was at her workplace. Well, then the officer told her that he would take her there to retrieve the key. When he said that, Brady told her, just give him the key.
Right.
When police entered the room, they saw Edward's body, and so they arrested Brady. As Brady was dressing, he said him and Edward got into it. It didn't end well. You think?
Yeah.
Hindley wasn't arrested, but she demanded to go to the police station with Brady and with her dog. She told them what happened to Edward was an accident. The next few days, Hindley was she'd asked her employer for a layoff so she could remain out of work but still make some money. That was the last thing she needed to be worried about.
Absolutely.
She also received a letter addressed to Brady that she had burned in an ashtray. She assumed it had to do with bank robberies. Now, I find that kind of weird. I mean, you'll see later on that that's what they intended to do, but there was nothing in here to even... they didn't even go to a bank. So I don't know why this was of relevance, but it was in the report.
She had to be just trying to think of something.
Yeah.
Like brainstorming. Maybe if I do this.
Yeah, maybe it'll take them off the trail onto something else.
Yeah. Not well thought out at all.
No. The more police investigated, the more Hindley was looking like she was involved. October the 11th, she was arrested and charged with accessory after the fact. When searching their home, they found an exercise book with the name of John Kilbride. He was a missing person.
Ooh.
That made them think that Hindley and Brady may be involved in the recent missing persons that they had.
Maybe.
Yeah, during that time, they had quite a few missing persons, so...
Sounds like it.
Brady stated that Edward put up a good fight, but it was him and Smith who had killed them, not Hindley. She just done whatever she was told to do.
Oh, right.
Now, Smith said that Brady asked him to destroy some books he had stored in a suitcase. He had no idea what else was in the suitcase. But Smith told the cops that Brady had a thing for railroad stations. So the police went to the railroad station and discovered some unclaimed suitcases. On October 15th, he found a stub in a book that belonged to Hindley. They also found notes and photographs of a young girl with a scarf tied around her mouth and an audio tape of a woman named Lesley Western that was screaming, crying, and pleading to be let go so she could go home to her mom. Now, what's really heartbreaking is Leslie's mother was asked to come identify her daughter in the photos as well as her voice that was on that audio.
Oh, God.
I could only imagine how painful that was, listening to your baby screaming and pleading to be let go to come home to you. That just had to be brutal.
It had to be. My God.
But she identified that that was, in fact, her daughter. Police interviewed neighbors, and the neighbors told the cops that they went to the moors a lot, and they had a favorite spot that they would go to. So police went to that location and began to search. October 16th, while they were searching, they found an arm. They eventually uncovered the rest of the body, and the body was still identifiable. The mother identified her clothing that had also been buried.
Can you imagine how that mother is feeling? I mean, that had to be... Oh.
I know. Smith told police that Brady would brag about having photos of Moores and proof of all the murders. On October 21st, they found a badly decomposing body that was later identified as John Kilbride. Now, his mother, again, this mother, identified his clothing as well. They charged Brady and Hindley with the murders of Edward Evans and Lesley Downey. They made a short appearance on October the 28th and were remanded into custody. But they were also under suspicion of the disappearances of the missing children. Now, Brady admitted to taking pictures of Lesley, but said she went with 2 other men and she was still alive when they went. He had no idea where they went or who they were. Yeah, do you believe that?
No, hell no.
They called off the search for the other missing children in November due to the winter. But on December 2nd, Brady was officially charged with the murders of Lesley and Edward and being an accessory to the murder of John. On December 6th, Hindley was charged with the murders of Edward and Lesley. She was also charged for harboring Brady after she had knew that he had killed someone. The pictures taken at the moor had Hindley's dog in the photo, and they hired a vet to estimate the dog's age. Now, I don't understand this at all. I don't know how or why they done this, but it says that they had to put the dog under anesthesia in order to determine its age. Now, I mean, it's in the 60s. I don't know anything like how they done it back then.
Right.
But unfortunately, the dog never woke back up, and Hindley was furious. She accused them of killing her dog, and that was the only time she ever showed emotion.
Over her dog.
Right. Now, they took him to trial, and it lasted 2 weeks and began on April 19th, 1966, in a packed courtroom. They had to install bulletproof glass as they were concerned with the public getting to them. If that tells you how.
Yeah, that's some angry folks right there.
Yeah. And it's very high profile. The news media ran rapid and all the local hotels were full. And they were charged with the murders of Edward, John, and Lacey. Media was offering them money in exchange for their stories.
Wow.
Of course, they both pled not guilty. But Brady testified for 8 hours and Hindley testified for 6. Brady admitted to hitting Edward with a hatchet, but said he didn't kill him. But yet, his dead body was found in his house. So, I don't know who. Supposedly, he just miraculously, poof, he died, and he just happened to be in his house.
That's what he wanted everybody to believe.
Oh, yeah, but he didn't have anything to do with it. But, I did hit him in the head with a hatchet, but,
But that's not even relevant.
Yeah. I don't know why that would have anything to do with it.
The thoughts that go through people's minds just blows my mind sometimes.
I know. It's like, are you really that stupid? Like, do you really believe that everybody that you're talking to is that stupid and would not realize that you're just full of shit?
Oh, sometimes I think that's how people think.
Now, Hindley denied that the photos taken at Moore's was of her in the gravesites because they had several pictures of her supposedly standing on top of the graves of the people that they had killed with her dog. But now she denied all of this. The audio tape was played in court as well. Now, she said she was downstairs when Lesley was being undressed, and she was looking out the window when Brady was taking pictures of her. When Lesley was being strangled to death, she had left the room to run her bath, so she didn't see anything.
That sounds pretty convenient to me.
Mm-hmm. On May 6th, after the jury was out for 2 hours, they found Brady guilty of the 3 murders, and Hindley was found guilty of 2 of the 3 murders. The death penalty was not possible because they had just abolished it 6 months prior.
God dang.
I know. Brady was sentenced to life in prison on each victim to a total of 3 life sentences, and Hindley was also sentenced to 2 life terms plus 7 years for the harboring of Brady. Now, they were both under suspicion of the recent child abductions. In December 1962, they were being looked at for the disappearance and murder of a 3-year-old boy. But in 1988, his father was found guilty of killing him. December 1964, a 14-year-old disappeared as well, and they again were looked at, but she was later found alive. And Hindley had bragged to another inmate that she and Brady had murdered a 6th victim, which was a teenage girl. On July 3rd, 1985, they interviewed Brady for other murders. And in 1986, a mother of a missing son wrote Hindley begging her to tell her what happened to him. Hindley refused any involvement, but now she did agree to look at photographs and maps to try to identify the spots where Brady and her had went to the moors. On December 16, 1986, Hindley went to the police back up to moors to try to identify the spots. And the press deemed this as a fiasco and said it was a total waste of money. And unfortunately, they didn't find anything. On February 10th, 1987, Hindley confessed to the involvement of 5 murders, but the police kept this from the public. Her statement lasted 17 hours.
Jeez.
She said when all the murders occurred, she wasn't there. She was either in the car, down the hill, taking a bath, or in the kitchen. Now, they confronted Brady about Hindley's confession, and at first he thought they were bullshitting him, but then police would give him information that only Hindley would know. And he said the only way he was going to confess was if they allowed him to commit suicide. Obviously.
Yeah.
They can't allow that. But you know what? I would have called his bluff and said, okay, dude, go ahead. And then after he confessed, just tell him that I was just kidding.
Right.
You know? I was just joking. Too bad you didn't call my bluff. Now, the mother that sent Hindley a letter about her son sent another letter pleading for answers. And then Hindley stated that if the police had came to her 14 years earlier, she would have confessed.
What?
Yeah. Hindley was able to assist the police for a second search of the moor in March of 1987. She told them they were searching in the right area, but they just didn't find anything. April 1987, her confession was made public. Lord Longford, unsure of who that is, pleaded for her release, stating that she was being detained to satisfy mob emotion, and that was wrong. Yeah. On July 1st, after 100 days of searching at the moor, they found the body of Pauline Reade, buried 3 foot and 100 yards from where they had found Lesley. Now remember, Pauline was their first victim.
Right.
Brady then made a full confession, and he decided also to help the police search. But when they took him to moor on July 3rd, he couldn't identify anything. He blamed it on the changes in vegetation over the years. And they didn't want to, but they brought him back up in December, I'm assuming when, most of the vegetation was dead.
Right.
But again, they didn't find anything. After his first visit back to moor, Brady had written a letter to the press stating that he had killed 5 other people. But police didn't find anything in regards to that confession. They never went to trial for the last confession because they were already imprisoned for the maximum term anyhow. In 2005, they searched moors again looking for Keith using ground-penetrating radar but came up empty. And in mid-2009, they had exhausted all their searches. Hindley was known as the most evil woman in Britain. She died in 2002 in a hospital while being incarcerated at the age of 60. She had spent a total of 36 years in prison. And Brady was diagnosed as a psychopath in 1985 and was confined to a mental hospital. He kept up with his pleas, wanting to commit suicide. He finally died in 2017 at the age of 79 after serving 51 years in prison. The judge described them two as sadistic killers of the utmost depravity.
I mean, that sounds legit.
Yeah. Now, Anne Brady was born on January 2nd, 1938, to Margaret Stewart. She was an unmarried waitress, and his father was unknown. She was forced to place him with another couple as she was unable to care for him, but she stayed in contact with him. He took on their name, and then he was known as Ian Sloan. It was said that he used to torture animals, but he denied it. Apparently, he used to boast about killing a cat when he was 10 years old, and then burning a cat alive and cutting off the heads of rabbits.
Jesus Christ.
And he got in trouble in school, and he left school at the age of 15 to go work as a tea boy in a shipyard. He then worked as a butcher's messenger's boy. His relationship with his first girlfriend ended when he threatened her with a knife for visiting a dance with another boy.
Oh, that's so extreme.
Right before his 17th birthday, Brady found himself in court with 9 charges against him. He was placed on probation as long as he lived with his mother. By then, his mother had remarried and her husband found him a job. Apparently, they got along really well because Brady took his last name. And within that first year of being home, though, Brady got caught for shoplifting and went to prison for 3 months. And since he was under the age of 18, he was also placed in a borstal for training.
A what?
A borstal. Basically, that's like a group home for delinquent teens.
Okay.
Now, he got in more trouble there by being caught being drunk on his homemade alcohol that he brewed. So they sent him to the harshest borstal. He was released on November 14th, 1959. And then he decided to better himself, and he began going to the library and teaching himself about bookkeeping. And his parents were shocked because he spent hours in his room reading.
About bookkeeping?
Yeah.
That's an odd choice.
I know. Out of all the things you could choose.
Bookkeeping. I mean, you can't even make that much money doing that.
I know. In January 1959, he did get a clerical job at the wholesale chemical company, and his co-workers described him as quiet, punctual, but very short-tempered. Now, Myra Hindley was born on July 23, 1942, to Nellie and Bob Hindley. Her father was an alcoholic and was very abusive to Nellie and also to her and her siblings. The home was described as being very poor. It was a tiny home, and Hindley was forced to sleep in a bed right up against her parents' bed. When her sister was born, she was forced to go live with her grandmother. Her father was in the military and was described as a hard ass, and he expected his daughters to be just as hard. He taught them how to fight and how to take up for themselves, and they were praised for their violence.
Wow. That's some great parenting right there.
I know. A psychiatrist said that her relationship with her father brutalized her.
You think?
Yeah. Her first job was a junior clerk at a local engineering firm. Now, at 17, she got engaged, but she broke it off, saying that he was too immature and couldn't give her the life that she wanted to have. Which, I'm glad she saw that.
Yeah, no kidding.
In January 1961, Hindley was 18 years old and she was a typist. This is when she first laid eyes on Brady and she was in love. She spoke to him on July 27th. Finally, in October, Brady asked her out to the movies. And they began dating, which consisted of X-rated movies.
What?
Yeah.
And this was when?
This was 1961.
Jeez, you can watch those back then?
I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they watched X-rated movies, and then they would go back to her house and drink German wine. And then they started reading books about the Nazis during their lunch breaks, and they were fascinated.
Interesting. So they kind of got a little extremist there.
Mm-hmm. Hindley began bleaching her hair blonde and wearing red lipstick. She then began to wear unfavorable clothes like mini skirts, high boots, and leather jackets. Can you imagine that in the 60s?
I know, right?
I mean, the red lipstick would have been like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know?
Look at that girl.
I know. They had planned on becoming bank robbers, but that never planned out.
Oh, that's a prestigious thing to aspire for.
Oh no, let's go be bank robbers. Hindley said that Brady started talking about committing the perfect murder, and by June of 1963, they were living together. And on July 12th, they committed the first murder.
Well, one for the books.
She said she was so in love with Brady that if he told her the sky was green, she would believe it, and she did whatever he asked of her.
Wow.
I
don't even have words for that.
I know. I looked it up. She is an attractive lady. I mean, she wasn't like in there at all.
Yeah.
You know, she was very pretty. Now, I don't think he was attractive at all, but, you know, to each their own.
Right.
But I wonder if it ever bothered her that he was raping these kids or that he was killing them. I mean, I guess not.
And obviously she knew.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I mean,
but I mean, I can see like if she was the same type of person that had no remorse and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think wouldn't you think she would kind of be somewhat jealous that he was raping them? Kind of like, you know, he's sleeping with someone else. It's almost like an affair,
right.
You know?
It's like she's not even looking at it that way for some reason.
Yeah.
I wonder if she was just like literally brainwashed.
Yeah, well, I mean, she went along with it.
Yeah.
I mean, even if I'm trying to put myself there, like if I had no remorse over killing another human being, I wonder if it would bother me if my husband was fucking other people.
I mean, it would me.
You
that
know?
would not be okay.
And it's not just women, it's women and men.
And how could she lay down and sleep with him again?
I don't know.
That's just what's got me
I know.
baffled.
But, you know, I guess it didn't bother her because she went along with it. Now,
Obviously.
they both spent the rest of their life in prison.
Good.
But my heart goes out to the mother who just wanted answers into what happened to her son. I mean, that is totally heartbreaking. And as far as I know, I don't think they ever found him.
That's terrible.
I know.
I feel so bad for that.
This is the story of the week, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, and donate to this channel. It really helps me a lot. A big thanks to those who already have. If you haven't already, Southern Sass has a new website that you can go to stay in the know about everything that we are doing. That website is www.southernsassproductions.com. And until next time, Ravens, avoid rest stops and be safe.
Y'all be safe. See ya.
Hey guys, welcome to the Raven Knox. Coming up, we have the story of basically a Bonnie and Clyde of murder. Back in the day, it was like this huge story that happened in Britain, and I hope you guys will be just as intrigued as I was. Around 7:30, the motorcycle flashed its lights to signal the van to stop. When Lesley was being strangled to death, she had left the room to run her bath, so she didn't see anything. April 1987, her confession was made public. Lord Longford, unsure of who that is, pleaded for her release, stating that she was being detained to satisfy mob emotion, and that was wrong.